Right. And since you brought up the topic of having a vision of the future on which you're going to bet in which direction the company should go, one of the things that commonly comes up in these sort of circumstances are disagreements. So I would like to know what methods or tactics that you use when there is a disagreement from both as a from an investor front and from a founder operator front as well. And what are some uh, common patterns that you have seen very smart people fall into and make mistakes when they're actually disagreeing with somebody?
Absolutely. And this is something that, I still deal with on a daily basis, right? This is part of human nature. We see things differently, we disagree. And the thing to remember is I always tell people, listen, people are disagreeing for good reasons. Their perspective is what it is, and they are trying their best for the company, just like you're trying your best for the company. So it's not that they're your opponent or your enemy. They just have a different point of view. And it's entirely possible that their point of view is right and your point of view is wrong. Nobody is right 100% of the time. So having a degree of humility about these things is always very important. But that's just, background. That's not actually a technique for fixing it. It's just, necessary for everyone to sort of respect each other and understand that people are doing this for rational reasons. They're not irrational. There's always a reason behind things. So what are the specific techniques? The first is to be very precise in your language and make sure people spell out the assumptions they're making. Because an engineering team, an engineering leader will say, we can't do that. And that doesn't mean this is impossible to do. What it may mean instead is because of the current data structures in how we are storing our data, this will prove very difficult. The specific implementation you're suggesting will be very difficult. But if you take a step back and you explore those assumptions, there's two assumptions being made. One is that there is a particular way that this is going to happen. And the second is that this is the only way that this can happen. And in fact, if the business side and the engineering side are going to be able to trust each other and collaborate, then on the business side, you could say, look, here is what we're trying to accomplish. We want to offer the following things to the user, and here's why we believe this will be helpful. Here's the evidence that the user will actually adopt and respond to this. And then on the engineering side, the engineering leader can say, oh, well, if that's what you're trying to do, actually, we can do something very similar if we do the following. And that doesn't require us to completely change our data structure. And in fact, we can get this to you in 2 weeks from now. And this is a conclusion that they would never reach if they were just dug in and saying, well, why are you telling me that just can't be done? I mean, you just can't just say no all the time. And on the other hand, the engineering leader says, well, you keep asking for the impossible. You don't understand what I'm facing. Right? That kind of conflict happens all the time in these companies. And a lot of it is because they're not taking a step back, looking at the underlying assumptions and operating in a collaborative way. So that's one very important thing. The other very important technique is that people will go ahead and have these different arguments of various kinds. And if you are like me as a product manager or as a CEO trying to mediate these kinds of debates, part of what you need to be able to do to mediate the debate is to really say, well, let me make sure I understand what you're saying and restate it and make sure that the way you restate it actually reflects what they think. And this process is tedious sometimes because they'll say, no, that's not actually it. It's actually this. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, let's try this again. And it's only when you're able to articulate one side's thoughts effectively that you've truly understood them. And then when you've done that for both sides, then you'll have a deeper understanding and you'll be able to more effectively act as that translator so that each side can understand the other. So it's not just a question of having the right attitude, it's a question of putting in the work to deeply understand what is actually being said. Because far too often, whether it is in English or Hindi or whatever language, no language is as precise as code. And even code can be written in multiple ways. I'll tell developers, I'm like, is there only one way to write that particular function or class or method or what have you? No, there's many ways to do it. And so even though code is the most precise form of language, it still has imprecision involved. And so we must work to understand what's actually being said, and give each other some slack along the way, because everyone is trying to do the right thing. It's just everyone has a different set of starting points and assumptions.